How did you first get into designing visual sets for concerts, and what sparked your interest in this field?
It's music. It's always been about music. And I grew up in the north of England, and was finishing high school in the mid to late 70s, and was a real all-rounder. I was bright. I did well at school, but there wasn't anything I felt particularly driven to do career-wise. But music was everything, as it often is with teenagers. And I was very lucky because just as I was leaving high school is when punk rock kicked in the UK. And even though I had no notion that I could ever make a career out of it, I just knew that whatever this thing was, I wanted to be part of this, and had lots of friends who were in bands. And I was never going to be in a band, but I could see that there was a lot of opportunity for other creative pursuits around this. And it's quite interesting because even though punk on the one hand was very dismissive of putting any effort into certainly stage visuals, the whole DIY ethic made it very accessible. The fact that the ethos was just that anybody can do anything. It wasn't intimidating. And it's funny, even though now we live in a very different world, there's something about certainly in the UK, the feeling of things falling apart, that I kind of recognize from the 70s, because we were definitely coming into a period, as pre-Margaret Thatcher, coming into a period where everything seemed to be just coming part of the seams. And for young people, I think rather than being frightening, that can feel like an opportunity, because there are spaces, there are holes you can get through. So that's right. Looking back, that's absolutely what I did. And the kind of shows, it was just clubs and pubs. And so it was mostly about lighting and just finding simple ways. And also there was still a lot of art school bands around who, even though they embraced the kind of energy of punk, were more interested in visual presentation.
Over the span of your 4-decade-long career, what key moments or individuals have been significant inspirations in shaping your creative journey and approach to show design?
I've done 4 decades with U2, so actually my own career is even longer than that, which is hard to believe. Yeah. But certainly meeting U2 at the time I did was really pivotal. And again, it was music driven. When their first record dropped, I had no idea who these people were, but there was just something about what this whole thing was. And I really felt, it sounds corny, but I belong together. And we're the same age, and we're from similar sort of backgrounds. So that was really pivotal. Now, when we met, I don't think we had no idea that we knew it would be a long-term project, but we had no idea we'd still be doing it 40 years later. There were some people, some not famous people who were really helpful, and obviously people I didn't know personally, but who were inspiring along the way. And those kind of people, I don't think realize how helpful and how crucial those interactions can be. But it was really just enough for me to understand that making it up as you go along is actually okay. In fact, that's what being an artist is. And you're on a journey of discovery rather than trying to find the answers, existing answers to known questions. In terms of sort of famous people who I didn't know who inspired me, Laurie Anderson was a huge inspiration. And the whole early 80s, that performance art scene with people like Namjoon Paik, who were experimenting with televisions as art objects. And Laurie has always been hugely inspiring. Just understanding the way live performance and pictures can work together. Those kind of moments have always been very helpful, where and actually, to be honest, I find the most inspiring things for me tend to be in different media. I go to, I see a lot of big art shows, people like Hiroshi Sugimoto, who I've admired for a long time, and people who are working in a different medium, but the inspiration they can give, whether it's to do with scale or detail or narrative or things like that.
When it comes to inspiration, are there specific themes, experiences, or sources that consistently fuel your creativity when conceptualizing a new show?
And as I say, I tend to find it is looking at different media. I go to a lot of art gallery shows, and a lot of dance, actually. I find contemporary dance quite inspiring because it's obviously a very different kind of performance. But the thing about rock or pop shows is they're not really about anything, or they're rarely about anything. And if you went to see a theatre piece that wasn't about anything, it would be very strange. Whereas with dance can be just the form. It doesn't have to have narrative. Obviously, some dance does, but it doesn't have to. And there's a freedom in the form, and there's a freedom in the shape of that I really like. I really like seeing monumental sculpture, scale. Obviously, scale is a big part of what I've done, and understanding how other people deal with that kind of scale. I really like the land artists, James Turrell and those kind of people, because they work on even by my standards, on an unimaginable scale.
Yes.
I like time, sort of duration pieces, because concerts are generally between 90 minutes and 2 hours, and it's a very contained form. And so pieces of work that work in a different time scale. I really liked the Philip Glass pieces, where the whole point was that you kind of would come and go. There's a wonderful guy or person, I think he's non-binary, called Taylor Mack, who has done these extraordinary pieces, some of which would last up to 24 hours.
As the fifth member of U2, can you share a bit about the collaborative process between you and the band in translating their musical vision, and how has this collaboration evolved over the 40 years you have worked together?
It's a very different kind of relationship to somebody I'm working with for the first time, but it's not. It doesn't make it better or worse. It's just different, and there are pros and cons to both things. Obviously, with somebody new, there's a freshness. I'm working with this wonderful woman who performs under the name of Self-Esteem. Rebecca Taylor is her name. She's actually from the same town in England that I'm from, which gave us another bond. And I've known her for a year or so, and there's just a freshness about coming in with a completely clean slate with somebody new. But the great thing about working with U2 is you're not just thinking about this show or this tour. It's about a body of work. And so we've been able very consciously there's a freedom that comes with deciding that this time we're going to do this kind of show. You don't feel like you have to do everything, make everything in every show. And certainly with what's led to the Sphere show, the root of that is Zoo TV, Pop Mart, the very big video visual shows, the very early shows that we did like that. But what was freeing about that was after Zoo TV, I wasn't sure that we would do another big video show, because I felt like we'd said pretty much everything we had to say. But with Pop Mart, because the LED technology was just emerging, we realized that we could make a screen the size of the end of a stadium, which now is normal, but then was completely revolutionary. So we did that again. But the following tour, of course, it was called Elevation, and it was indoors in arenas, and there was practically no video at all. It really was about a band playing. And to be able to have that kind of ebb and flow in terms of the type of shows that we've attempted has been very helpful. A rock show is unique in that, in many ways, the performers are the directors. It's about them. and they ultimately are the ones that have to make it all work. But of course, they are the only people that can't sit and watch the show. They can come and look at the visuals and this and the other, but then it all falls apart. So it's a very there has to be a lot of trust in both directions, because in many ways I'm their eyes, and I can watch from all over the building. I always make sure I'm able to see the show from the barricade and from the nosebleed seats. And I think the duration of our relationship has really helped, because we have a shorthand where we just know what is working and what isn't working. And that's not to say that we don't still have arguments. I really enjoy the arguments. But they come from a place of either experimentation or trying to find something new. We're very much of a mind in terms of what we're trying to achieve, I think. And it's incredibly helpful for them to have an eye that can watch the whole thing. I know musically, I know their catalog probably better than they do, because obviously U2 don't spend much time listening to U2 records. Whereas Ez Devlin, who's one of our collaborators, she calls me the gazetteer. Whereas I really, I'm always looking with each new project, I'm looking for things that we can pull out of the past. And also have an eye for the audience, because I'm very tuned into the emotion of the audience, because I'm right in the middle of them. And even though as a band gets older, some like playing a B-side from the first record is only exciting to about 1% of the audience, but you still have to manage all those expectations. And U2, they're very good at it. Edge particularly is very good at it. He has a good sense of what we can pull out of the past. But those kind of things, they're really born of the length of the relationship.
Among the numerous concerts you have designed for U2, is there one that stands out as the most memorable for you in terms of design challenges and creative breakthroughs?
There are many for different reasons. Some are simply scale, I suppose. With the 360 tour, where we were in the middle of stadiums, the side effect was we could sell all the seats and also have several thousand more people on the floor. So the capacities were bigger than they would be for sport. And there were some places where we were getting 100,000 people into these stadiums. And we did 3 nights in Mexico City. And I don't know why it was the middle night, but the second one, I remember just watching it. And the thing about having that many more people there in a contained space is it's so loud. The audience is so loud. Plus, of course, they're Mexicans, so they sort of count double. And that emotionally, that was pretty amazing. That show finished with a song called Moment of Surrender. And the entire place was singing the song, and it was pretty remarkable. But other ones I loved, we did a show in Poland. U2 hadn't played Poland during the 80s, and on the Pop Mart tour, did the first show, was in Warsaw, and we did the thing. New Year's Day wasn't in that show, and that song is loosely about the solidarity movement. So they put the song in the show when we made a little visual piece with the solidarity banners and everything, and the audience went nuts. I mean, they just went nuts because they knew that it was unscripted. Anyway, the following tour, maybe it would have been Vertigo, went back, played a stadium there, and completely by themselves. And again, it was that would have been before viral media. The audience, through whatever local radio, had decided that in New Year, because they knew that U2 would play New Year's Day for them. So it was almost like an appointment now. It was almost like a date.
In the fast-evolving landscape of entertainment technology, how have you adapted your creative process over the years?
Really good question. I think I at least have to, have to be aware of everything that's going on and really stay interested and don't get cynical. But don't think, as I always say to students, don't confuse a piece of equipment with an idea. A piece of equipment isn't an idea. It might help you realize something wonderful, but in and of itself, it's not going to get you anywhere because it's available to everybody. I think the pandemic, in many ways, it was like World War II with the atomic bomb. It accelerated a certain kind of technology. I think more than anything, that showed us that there is no replacement for live entertainment. People, even with the Sphere, people are saying, "Is this the future? Is this? Is that?" I think all these things will become another stream. I think there'll be additions to the range of entertainment and art available, but nothing will replace live entertainment. It's incredible.
Are there specific technological advancements that have played a pivotal role in shaping your design philosophy?
The technology can enhance all these things, and it can certainly take us on interesting new journeys, but it's not going to replace the core event, which is human beings in the same airspace watching a very special human being who can do something they can't do.
With such a vast catalog of U2 concerts, is there a particular visual or design element from a past show that you find especially iconic or representative of your creative style?
I think I'm proudest of the ones where the performance and the architecture really work together to make that emotional connection. Because in some ways, U2 360 was the pinnacle of the kind of architectural or the sculptural kind of element. But that didn't work it worked well in some ways because it made the stadium smaller. But it didn't work. The show Innocence and Experience, which again we did before the pandemic, was the greatest synthesis of performance, visuals, lighting, sound I've ever seen. Even Brian Eno liked it. And the thing that made all that work, that would have just been showbiz were it not for the fact we really used it to tell a story. We really used it to have this narrative running through it. And that was pretty great. That bus doesn't come along very often. It's not like you always need narrative, but when it all works together, it's pretty great.
The Sphere in Las Vegas is a groundbreaking venue. How did the unique characteristics of it influence your design approach for the show? How did you use the Sphere as a canvas to create a distinct visual experience for the audience?
I mean, really, in some ways, I was going to say in some ways it was much easier. There was nothing about it that was easy, but we were given the canvas. It wasn't like with any other kind of show where you're starting with an absolutely blank page. We knew what the building was, we knew what the shape was. It's actually very limited in there in terms of what you can do in terms of staging, because they show the film, the house film, the Darren Aronofsky film, that shows on all of the non-show days. So all of the show equipment has to get out of the way. So it was really quite limited in terms of what we could do physically, which in a way was helpful because the decisions we had to make in terms of how to harness the visual potential were completely overwhelming. So at least having the architecture sorted out was pretty good. And the shape of it, because it's an amphitheater, there's not a lot of point in doing the traditional runways because there's not really anywhere to go. So as I say, the architecture I felt like was obvious. And so we could really start thinking about how do you deal with a visual element that's so out of scale to human beings. In a sense, what made it manageable, being the first people in there where it's a total unknown, was that there were a lot of things that we did know that we wouldn't normally have. There were a lot of givens that we wouldn't normally have in putting a show together, principally the sort of staging approach and a lot of the set list. So that was really helpful. And then really I had to I had to think about the show in terms of the impact we knew that this building was going to have anyway. Because normally I would hold back. I'm not necessarily one for going in all guns blazing. I like a little bit of tease beforehand. But because we knew all this building, all anyone would talk about was big screen, big screen, big screen. I think it was pointless. People know it's there. You know? Whereas in a lot of shows, I managed to, there are big visuals, but I managed to kind of hide them. So if you didn't know, you wouldn't know they were coming. Everybody knew it was coming. So I just thought, okay, let's just go in. And for the first half an hour of that show, we just drive a truck over the audience. I mean, people just, yeah. Even people who've seen a lot of shows and a lot of U2 shows, there's nobody I have met, including all of the industry people, who has said that they were in any way disappointed with that first half hour. I mean, we absolutely annihilate them.
Delving into the technical innovations of the Las Vegas residency, can you share insights into how you integrated the Sphere's LED screen, the world's largest and highest resolution, to provide a fully immersive experience for the audience?
One of the things we learned early on was that the playback system in the Sphere is designed for showing movies at extremely high resolution, which it does very well. But it is not the kind of system that would be typical for concert touring, where we need to have all kinds of manipulation, multiple images, camera integration, effects. So essentially, we had to invent that system. Some systems exist. In fact, there's a company called Disguise with a system called D3, which was partly developed for U2 in the middle 2000s. And we ended up using a version of that where basically we have about 24 of these servers running together. It was I mean, that was one of the biggest achievements. And just data management. You know, the size of the files and the cloud storage and the servers. Before you even think of an image, there's a massive infrastructure. But fortunately, Treatment, which is my company, we got some very clever people, and in tandem with the equipment suppliers, we did figure that out. But for me, once I understood the technology, it was about storytelling, really. So everything is about, it's me asking for things in service of telling a story of the show.
The collaboration with artists like S. Devlin, John Gerard, Marco Brambilla, and Industrial Light and Magic is intriguing. How did these collaborations come about, and how did their contributions enhance the overall visual narrative of the performance?
Yeah, there are different kinds of collaborators. Some people made a very specific piece, and then other people are more part of the DNA of the show overall. And the producer, Treatment, my company, they were the overall producers for all of the visual material, because somebody has to be in charge, somebody has to organize that. Yeah. And within that structure, and most of us have known each other for a long time. So in terms of the organization, we had Treatment at one end, and then in terms of the sort of concept and creative, there are three of us. There's myself as Devlin, and then Rick Lipson from Stewfish. And we've worked together for about 10 years. And it's odd because we all have our own design companies. So it's an odd sort of thing. And we'll never work together on anything else because no one's going to hire three companies. But it's just the way this has evolved. And each of us has a slightly different angle on it. Obviously, I'm the director, so I need to keep the overall picture in mind. Rick is slightly more pragmatic, and he's an architect, so he has the architectural side, and then Ez brings the kind of conceptual, like the artistic underpinning of everything, and it really works. And we found with the pre-pandemic shows, Innocence and Experience, we've just found great ways of working. We actually made scrapbooks rather than, because we're also sick of CAD models. We started to make scrapbooks essentially of how the show narrative would work, and paintings, and they're really wonderful books that we make to sort of try and tell the story of a show, even if there's no specific, because with the Sphere there's no specific narrative, but there is obviously a shape to the show, and there's a journey. So those collaborators work in that way. And then there are people who would come in to do a specific thing. Marco Brambilla, who made the astonishing piece for Even Better Than the Real Thing. That was based on a piece of his work that I saw, and just took one look at it and thought, I don't know who this person is, but we need to get their number. And John Gerard, who similarly Bono saw a piece called Western Flag, which is the black smoke flag, and John had another one, Flare, which is the fire flag, and then he made the surrender flag, the white smoke flag. He made that for the show. And then Industrial Light and Magic, who were wonderful. Bono had this vision. It was the first thing for the show. Bono had this vision that at some point we'd make the building disappear, and outside would be Las Vegas, exactly as it is. I explained that mostly you're looking at the Hilton car park, but he didn't seem to mind. But then it would unbuild. We'd basically go back in time. You'd see like reverse time lapse of it all unbuilding, and we end up in the desert, which is what Las Vegas was before it was Las Vegas. And so Industrial Light and Magic came in and did that very specific piece. So that's the sort of scale of the team. And then a lot of the treatment people will facilitate. Ez has two pieces in the show, which she directed. They were the ones that closed the show, but they're hands-on. They were physically made by people at treatment. So there's a range of how the collaborators work.
As someone deeply involved in groundbreaking projects, how do you respond to the criticism that large domes might be viewed as imposing or disconnected from the cultural and architectural fabric of a city?
I think it's true, and I'm not disappointed that the London Sphere is not going ahead. But in Las Vegas, I mean, it doesn't really look out of place in Las Vegas. So I think you can't just put these things in places where they don't make any sense. As Devlin is very good at this, she when again, and it comes all about the money and how you spend $2 billion on a building, but Ez would respond, look, there are lots of buildings in the world that have cost that kind of money, but this one is a theater. It's open to the public. People come to be together in this building. So it's worth, I mean, I understand all the criticisms, but it's worth tempering them with the ambition, which is to bring people together in real time, and put on these cultural events. And as I say, the pandemic has shown that there's nothing that can replace them. So no, I have very mixed feelings about the whole thing. Okay. But given that we're in it, we're doing it, I think we've absolutely made the best of it.
Amidst the ongoing criticisms and debates concerning large-scale entertainment venues, what is your perspective on how the dome concept will influence the trajectory of live performances in the future?
I think it will be something to be explored, because really what we've done, the idea of immersive experiences, which have been around for, I don't know, 10 years or so, which have been really, really popular, and some are much better than others. What we've done is we've just married that with live performance. We've got a live performance in the middle of an immersive experience, and turns out it's worked incredibly well. So I can't imagine that won't continue. But I don't think it will replace anything. I think we've made something that's new rather than something that's going to replace anything. It's certainly not going to replace people going to see a band at the local pub or club.
How can designers ensure that these concepts contribute positively to the evolving landscape of entertainment venues despite public scrutiny?
I mean, so many questions, of course, the ecological concerns. But I think you have to, and for me, I can't, I never want to speak about, the specifics of buildings are what people should or shouldn't be doing. But I weigh it up for myself sometimes, and sure, um, what I do, there's definitely a carbon spend when we're in the middle of doing a show. But as Ez would say, that it's in the service of something very positive. And also the thing about the shows I do is that in the greater scheme of things, they're very short. It's not like a factory in China going night and day for years and years. Concert tours are quite short. But over the years, the number of people that have come up to me, people I don't know, who have known who I am, they come up to me and say that some show that I did was the high point of their life, and I'd go, let's rein it in a little bit, have you had children, that kind of thing. But they would say, no, these things, I understand that these are huge cultural milestones that are really important for people. And if that takes a carbon spend, then I think it's worthwhile. It's a cliche now, but it's like, what kind of world is it that we're trying to sustain when we make things sustainable? Yeah. And with any art, the greenest thing to do is just to not do it, because it's not, you couldn't argue that it's necessary in the same way as food and water, but culturally I think it really is necessary. And always the criticism is always unfair, because actually football is that's the real dirty secret, compared to entertainment. Football, because of the audience, the audience, because Radiohead did a study years ago and discovered that about 70% of the carbon footprint of a tour is the audience coming and going home again. And football is even worse because there's so many more matches. So no, they're big questions, but my concern is just, let's not lose the as they say, put the money on the screen, put the carbon on the screen, let's not lose the parts which give back culturally to us.